The footman returned with the Comtesse Mole's card, or rather what she had left in place of a card. Alleging that she had none on her, she had taken from her pocket a letter addressed to herself, and keeping the contents had handed in the envelope which bore the inscription, La Comtesse Mole. As the envelope was rather large, following the fashion in notepaper which prevailed that year, this manuscript card was almost twice the size of an ordinary visiting card. "That is what people call Mole's simplicity," said the Duchess ironically. "She wants to make us think that she had no cards on her, and to show her originality. But we know all about that, don't we, my little Charles? We are quite old enough and quite original enough ourselves to see through the tricks of a little lady who has only been going about for 4 years. She is charming, but she doesn't seem to me, all the same, to be quite big enough to imagine that she can take the world by surprise with so little effort as merely leaving an envelope instead of a card, and leaving it at 10 o'clock in the morning. Her old mother mouse will show her that she knows a thing or two about that." 387 Swann could not help smiling at the thought that the Duchess, who was, incidentally, a trifle jealous of de Mole's success, would find it quite in accordance with the Guermantes' wit to make some impertinent retort to her visitor. "So far as the title of Duc de Brabant is concerned, I've told you 100 times, Orion," the Duke continued, but the Duchess, without listening, cut him short. "But my little Charles, I'm longing to see your photograph." "Ah, extinctor draconis latrator anubis," said Swann. "Yes, it was so charming what you said about that when you were comparing the St. George at Venice. But I don't understand, why Anubis? What's the one like who was an ancestor of Babel?" asked M. de Guermantes. "You want to see his bauble," retorted his wife dryly, to show that she herself scorned the pun. "I want to see them all," she added. "Listen, Charles, let us wait downstairs till the carriage comes," said the Duke. "You can pay your call on us in the hall because my wife won't let us have any peace until she's seen your photograph. I am less impatient, I must say," he added with a satisfied air. "I am not easily moved myself, but she would see us all dead rather than miss it." "I am entirely of your opinion, Basin," said the Duchess. "Let us go into the hall. We shall at least know why we have come down from your study, while we shall never know how we have come down from the Counts of Brabant." "I've told you 100 times how the title came into the House of Hesse," said the Duke, while we were going downstairs to look at the photograph, "and I thought of those that Swann used to bring me at Cambrai. Through the marriage of a Brabant in 1241, with the daughter of the last Landgrave 388 of Thuringia and Hesse, so that really it is the title of Prince of Hesse that came to the House of Brabant rather than that of Duke of Brabant to the House of Hesse. You will remember that our battle cry was that of the Dukes of Brabant, Limburg to her conqueror, until we exchanged the arms of Brabant for those of Guermantes, in which I think myself that we were wrong, and the example of the Gramonts will not make me change my opinion." "But," replied de Guermantes, "as it is the King of the Belgians who is the conqueror. Besides, the Belgian crown prince calls himself Duc de Brabant. But, my dear child, your argument will not hold water for a moment. You know as well as I do that there are titles of pretension which can perfectly well exist even if the territory is occupied by usurpers. For instance, the King of Spain describes himself equally as Duke of Brabant, claiming in virtue of a possession less ancient than ours, but more ancient than that of the King of the Belgians. He calls himself also Duke of Burgundy, King of the Indies Occidental and Oriental, and Duke of Milan. Well, he is no more in possession of Burgundy, the Indies or Brabant than I possess Brabant myself, or the Prince of Hesse either, for that matter. The King of Spain likewise proclaims himself King of Jerusalem, as does the Austrian Emperor, and Jerusalem belongs to neither one nor the other." He stopped for a moment with an awkward feeling that the mention of Jerusalem might have embarrassed Swann in view of current events, but only went on more rapidly. "What you said just now might be said of anyone. We were at one time Dukes of Aumale, a duchy that has passed as regularly to the House of France as Joinville and Chevreuse 389 have to the House of Albert. We make no more claim to those titles than to that of Marquis de Noirmoutiers, which was at one time ours, and became perfectly regularly the appanage of the House of La Tremble. But because certain cessions are valid, it does not follow that they all are. For instance," he went on, turning to me, "my sister-in-law's son bears the title of Prince d'Agrigent, which comes to us from Joan the Mad, as that of Prince de Tarrant comes to the La Trembles. Well, Napoleon went and gave this title of Tarrant to a soldier, who may have been admirable in the ranks, but in doing so the Emperor was disposing of what belonged to him even less than Napoleon Roman III, when he created a Duc de Montmorency, since Perigord had at least a mother who was a Montmorency, While the Tarrant of Napoleon, I had no more Tarrant about him than Napoleon's wish that he should become so. That did not prevent Jacques d'Estanges, alluding to our uncle Conduit, from asking the procureur imperial if he had picked up the title of Duc de Montmorency in the mode of Vincennes. Listen, Basin, I ask for nothing better than to follow you to the ditches of Vincennes, or even to Taranto. And that reminds me, Charles, of what I was going to say to you when you were telling me about your St. George at Venice. We have an idea, Basin and I, of spending next spring in Italy and Sicily. If you were to come with us, just think what a difference it would make. I'm not thinking only of the pleasure of seeing you, but imagine, after all you've told me so often about the remains of the Norman conquest and of ancient history, imagine what a trip like that would become if you came with us. I mean to say that even Basin, what am I saying, Gilbert, would 390 benefit by it, because I feel that even his claims to the throne of Naples and all that sort of thing would interest me if they were explained by you in old Romanesque churches in little villages perched on hills like primitive paintings. But now we're going to look at your photograph. Open the envelope, said the Duchess to a footman. Please, Orion, not this evening. You can look at it tomorrow, implored the Duke, who had already been making signs of alarm to me on seeing the huge size of the photograph. But I like to look at it with Charles, said the Duchess, with a smile at once artificially concupiscent and psychologically subtle. For in her desire to be friendly to Swann she spoke of the pleasure which she would have in looking at the photograph, as though it were the pleasure an invalid feels he would find in eating an orange, or as though she had managed to combine an escapade with her friends with giving information to a biographer as to some of her favorite pursuits. All right, he will come again to see you, on purpose, declared the Duke, to whom his wife was obliged to yield. You can spend 3 hours in front of it if that amuses you, he added ironically. But where are you going to stick a toy of those dimensions? Why, in my room, of course. I like to have it before my eyes. Oh, just as you please. If it's in your room, probably I shall never see it, said the Duke, without thinking of the revelation he was thus blindly making of the negative character of his conjugal relations. Very well, you will undo it with the greatest care, Mme. De Guermantes told the servant, multiplying her instructions out of politeness to Swann. And see that you don't crumple the envelope either. So even the envelope has got to be respected. 391, the Duke murmured to me, raising his eyes to the ceiling. But Swann, he added, I, who am only a poor married man and thoroughly prosaic, what I wonder at is how on earth you managed to find an envelope that size. Where did you pick it up? Oh, at the photographer's. They're always sending out things like that. But the man is a fool, for I see he's written on it, the Duchesse de Guermantes, without putting Madame. I'll forgive him for that, said the Duchesse carelessly, then seeming to be struck by a sudden idea which enlivened her, checked a faint smile, but at once returning to Swann. Well, you don't say whether you're coming to Italy with us. Madame, I am really afraid that it will not be possible. Indeed, Mme. de Montmorency is more fortunate. You went with her to Venice and Vicenza. She told me that with you one saw things one would never see otherwise, things no one had ever thought of mentioning before, that you showed her things she had never dreamed of, and that even in the well-known things, she had been able to appreciate details which without you she might have passed by a dozen times without ever noticing. Obviously she has been more highly favored than we are to be. You will take the big envelope from M. Swann's photograph, she said to the servant, and you will hand it in from me this evening at 10:30 at Mme. La Comtesse Mole S. Swann laughed. I should like to know, all the same, Mme. De Guermantes asked him, how 10 months before the time you can tell that a thing will be impossible. My dear Duchess, I will tell you if you insist upon it, but first of all you can see that I am very ill. Yes, my little Charles, I don't think you look at all well. I'm not pleased with your color, 392, but I'm not asking you to come with me next week. I ask you to come in 10 months. In 10 months one has time to get oneself cured, you know. At this point a footman came in to say that the carriage was at the door. Come, Orion, to horse, said the Duke, already pawing the ground with impatience as though he were himself one of the horses that stood waiting outside. Very well, give me in one word the reason why you can't come to Italy. The Duchess put it to Swann as she rose to say goodbye to us. But my dear friend, it's because I shall then have been dead for several months. According to the doctors I consulted last winter, the thing I've got, which may, for that matter, carry me off at any moment, won't in any case leave me more than 3 or 4 months to live, and even that is a generous estimate, replied Swann with a smile, while the footman opened the glazed door of the hall to let the Duchess out. What's that you say? Cried the Duchess, stopping for a moment on her way to the carriage, and raising her fine eyes, their melancholy blue clouded by uncertainty. Placed for the first time in her life between two duties as incompatible as getting into her carriage to go out to dinner, and showing pity for a man who was about to die, she could find nothing in the code of conventions that indicated the right line to follow, and not knowing which to choose, felt it better to make a show of not believing that the latter alternative need be seriously considered, so as to follow the first, which demanded of her at the moment less effort, and thought that the best way of settling the conflict would be to deny that any existed. "You're joking," she said to Swann. "It would be a joke in charming taste," replied he ironically. "I don't know why I 393 am telling you this. I have never said a word to you before about my illness. But as you asked me, and as now I may die at any moment. But whatever I do, I mustn't make you late. You're dining out, remember," he added, because he knew that for other people their own social obligations took precedence of the death of a friend, and could put himself in her place by dint of his instinctive politeness. But that of the Duchess enabled her also to perceive in a vague way that the dinner to which she was going must count for less to Swann than his own death. And so, while continuing on her way towards the carriage, she let her shoulders droop, saying, "Don't worry about our dinner. It's not of any importance." But this put the Duke in a bad humor, who exclaimed, "Come, Orion, don't stop there chattering like that and exchanging your jeremiads with Swann. You know very well that Mme. de Saint-Hubert insists on sitting down to table at 8 o'clock sharp. We must know what you propose to do. The horses have been waiting for a good 5 minutes. I beg your pardon, Charles," he went on, turning to Swann, "but it's 10 minutes to 8 already. Orion is always late, and it will take us more than 5 minutes to get to old Saint-Hubert's." Mme. de Guermantes advanced resolutely towards the carriage and uttered a last farewell to Swann. "You know, we can talk about that another time. I don't believe a word you've been saying, but we must discuss it quietly. I expect they gave you a dreadful fright. Come to luncheon whatever day you like." With Mme. de Guermantes things always resolved themselves into luncheons. "You will let me know your day and time," and lifting her red skirt, she set her foot on the step. She was just 394 getting into the carriage when, seeing this foot exposed, the Duke cried in a terrifying voice, "Orion, what have you been thinking of, you wretch? You've kept on your black shoes, with a red dress. Go upstairs quick and put on red shoes, or rather," he said to the footman, "tell the lady's maid at once to bring down a pair of red shoes." "But my dear," replied the Duchess gently, annoyed to see that Swann, who was leaving the house with me but had stood back to allow the carriage to pass out in front of us, could hear, "since we are late." "No, no, we have plenty of time. It is only 10 to, it won't take us 10 minutes to get to the Parc Monceau. And after all, what would it matter? If we turned up at 8:30 they'll have to wait for us, but you can't possibly go there in a red dress and black shoes. Besides, we shan't be the last, I can tell you, the Sassenages are coming, and you know they never arrive before 20 to 9. The Duchess went up to her room. "Well," said M. de Guermantes to Swann and myself, "we poor, downtrodden husbands, people laugh at us, but we are of some use all the same. But for me, Orion would have been going out to dinner in black shoes." "It's not unbecoming," said Swann. "I noticed the black shoes and they didn't offend me in the least." "I don't say you're wrong," replied the Duke, "but it looks better to have them to match the dress. Besides, you needn't worry, she would no sooner have got there than she'd have noticed them, and I should have been obliged to come home and fetch the others. I should have had my dinner at 9 o'clock. Goodbye, my children," he said, thrusting us gently from the door. "Get away before Orion comes down again. It's not that she doesn't like seeing you both. On the contrary, she's 395 fond of your company. If she finds you still here she will start talking again. She is tired out already. She'll reach the dinner table quite dead. Besides, I tell you frankly, I'm dying of hunger. I had a wretched luncheon this morning when I came from the train. There was the devil of a béarnaise sauce, I admit, but in spite of that I shan't be at all sorry, not at all sorry to sit down to dinner. 5 minutes to 8. Oh, women, she'll give us both indigestion before tomorrow. She is not nearly as strong as people think." The Duke felt no compunction at speaking thus of his wife's ailments, and his own to a dying man, for the former interested him more, appeared to him more important, and so it was simply from good breeding and good fellowship that after politely showing us out, he cried from off stage, in a stentorian voice from the porch to Swann, who was already in the courtyard, "You, now, don't let yourself be taken in by the doctor's nonsense, damn them. They're donkeys. You're as strong as the Pont Neuf. You'll live to bury us all."